Today on our 2015 Chevrolet Colorado, we're going to be taking a look at showing you how to install the Roadmaster EZ4 baseplate kit with removable arms. Part number RM-523182-4. This is what our baseplate looks like when it's installed. As you can see, it's going to sit nice and tucked in underneath our fascia. It's not going to stick out too far. It also is going to come through the holes on our tow hooks, or where our tow hooks were. So we're not going to do any cutting or modifications on our fascia itself. It's going to have a nice black powder coat finish to resist any rusting and corrosion. You can see here, this is where your safety chain rings or safety chain hooks would attach. It's also going to come with removable arms with a pull pin. Put them in place. Simply push them in, twist until it locks. To remove them, pull back on the pin, twist the arm, and pull out. It's a fairly simple installation. It's going to have 2 bolts for each side that are going to mount in the same place that your tow hooks were mounted. The hardest part about this whole thing is removing the fascia. This installation is not going to require any drilling or cutting, and it's going to come with all the necessary hardware. First thing we need to do is we're going to need to remove our bumper fascia. To start with, we're going to have 3 bolts on each side of the vehicle, underneath the hood, on the top. They're going to be 7mm. Next thing we would need to do is in the center of your fascia, right above your license plate holder, if you look up inside here, right up inside this hole, there should be 2 10mm bolts there. Now, it seems that this fascia may have been removed prior and those bolts were not put back in. On your application or your removal, you will have 2 bolts in there that you will need to take out. Next, we're going to be removing this splash guard here, and you're going to have 4 bolts. 2 right here in the front, and you have 2 right here in the back. Use a 15mm socket to loosen them first, if we're going to be using any power tools. I'm going to make sure none of them are stuck. And we'll set that aside. Next, we're going to have 2 bolts here on the bottom of our fascia. We'll be using a 10mm socket. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a 7mm socket and this bolt right here, it attaches this piece onto a bracket and up behind your fender well. We need to take that bolt off. Your instructions aren't going to tell you that though. And you're going to have one on the other side. Next, you're going to take a T15 Torx bit. And you're going to have 7 screws, Torx screws, 3 along the bottom of your fender well. And you're going to follow 1, 2, 3, 4 up the side. And you're going to have that on both wheels, or both fenders. And you're going to repeat that same thing on the other side. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull back our fender liner. Go ahead and tuck it back behind the tire, out of the way. We're going to reach up and you're going to unplug the fog lights. You're just going to push it on that tab right there. And if you look right up here, you're going to have 3 7mm bolts we need to remove. Now if you see where this back one is here, if you're using a tool like this, you will need a short socket to get in there because this is kind of a tight space. Now with the next set of hands, we'll go ahead and remove our fascia. We're going to start from the outside by the fender and work our way toward the middle. You're going to have little tabs along this inside in between the fender and the fascia. You're going to pull down to pop those out. And then we'll set this aside, out of the way in a safe place so it doesn't get damaged. Next, we need to remove our air dam. You're going to have 3 plastic pushpin fasteners across the top. And then right on the edge here, we're going to have another clip that we need to release. We're going to start with the classic clips on the top. Take a flathead screwdriver. We'll pry out the center And you'll just take like a trim panel tool if you have one. So next you're going to take a real small screwdriver, flathead, and you're going to put it inside here. There's a clip. You're going to go in this way, and then you're going to pry out. So go in. You're going to pry out like this. Like that. Next, we're going to take a 15mm socket. We're going to remove the 4 bolts holding on our bumper beam. You're going to have 2 on the driver's side, 2 on your passenger side. And we'll just set this aside for now. Next, you're going to have some little foam pads that are on your tow hooks. We'll go ahead and take those off. Those will not be going back on. And you're going to have 2 bolts on each side that we're going to be removing to remove our tow hooks. Next, we're going to take an 18mm socket. Remove these 2 bolts here. Pull those out and remove your tow hook. Next, we're going to mount our base plate onto our frame. So I'm mount right there. We're going to have 2 bolts. They're going to go through and replace the 2 bolts that we took out for our tow hooks. Any of the bolts we put in, we're going to use red Loctite. Follow it with a flat washer, then a lock washer, and then the nut. And then repeat that same thing on the other side. Next thing we'll do is we'll torque down our bolts to the specifications and the instructions. We're using a 3/4 inch socket. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to replace our bumper beam. We'll be using the same bolts that we removed. Now that we've got a couple bolts in holding our beams in place, we're going to take some red Loctite again and put it on the threads of our bolts here. And we'll do the same thing to the other side. Let's go ahead and tighten down 4 bolts holding on our beam. Once you have those tightened down, go ahead and torque down your 2 bolts that are going into your base plate. Be using a 3/4 inch socket and 3/4 inch wrench. And we're going to torque them to the specifications and the instructions. So on the back of your fascia, you're going to have a thick piece of foam here, and you should have 2 clips, metal clips. This one is already off. You can see that metal clip there. You need to take that metal clip off and the one off over here, and then remove this foam piece, and it will not be going back on. Next, we can put our air dam back in place. We'll go ahead and reinstall our 3 push pins, fasteners. Once you have your base plate fully installed, now's the time you want to set your fascia back in place to make sure you're not going to have to make any modifications. As you can see here, we're not going to have to. It fits directly into the hole. And now it's a good idea, before you completely reattach your fascia, if you're putting any additional wiring or anything like that, it's going to be run back behind here. It's a good idea to get that in place now before getting your fascia in place. And that'll do it for a look at and installation on the Roadmaster EZ4 base plate kit with removable arms, part number RM-523182-4 on our 2015 Chevrolet Colorado.